What does business major really mean? Some people are starting to say that it's a new word for undecided. In this episode, I'm joined by Anita Doddi of Collegewise. We're going to break down the realities of what it means to choose business as a major. I mean, it means a lot of different things. It's a very wide field, and there's a lot of missteps that students make when they don't understand the field. We're going to talk about why it's so competitive and what might mean more than what's on your transcript to set students up for success if they're considering and majoring in business. So if you're wondering how to help your student who thinks they want to go into business know if it's really for them, and if so, how to stand out, go ahead and dive right in. Anita, welcome back to the show.
I'm so glad to be back, Lisa. It's great to talk to you again.
This is going to be fun. So, business majors. Oh my gosh, this is I know computer science is arguably the most, and I just recorded a podcast where we were talking about should computer science be the most popular major because there's a shrinking job market a little bit, which is fascinating. But business is right up there among the most popular majors. It can be very competitive depending on the school. So we want to dig into all things related to business majors and tied into my favorite topic, careers as well. So you love working with STEM and business, right?
Yeah, the vast majority of my students that I work with are STEM or business. I always like to say my sweet spot is actually working with undecided students, but I think a lot of students don't want to say they're undecided, or I just don't seem to get them. But I also like to talk about how business is a little bit of the new undecided. I think sometimes students are like, yeah, I'm interested in business. And when I probe a little bit more, I'm like, oh, what type of business? What got you started? They kind of look at me with a little bit of a blank stare. And it's interesting to try to go a little deeper and say, what does that mean? And I sometimes am getting, I think, the same vibe that I would get from an undecided student with some of these business hopefuls.
Do you if a kid's, because of course I work with tons of undecided students in my Launch Career Clarity course. So I get that. I'm curious, why do you think business has become the new undecided? Why isn't it engineering, or why isn't it computer science or something else?
I think a few things. So I think that, young people are asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? And it's such an intimidating, such a hard question. And so I think a lot of them are like, well, business, because, so many people that they see, whether it's like influencers or, just people making money, they are people who had some experience in business.
Yeah.
But a lot of students, and I think a lot of parents are really happy with that answer. Like, oh yeah, my kid wants to do business. They're going to do great. It's a career for maybe extroverted people who, it's sort of this stereotype, right? Of people who are going to make money, who, are very extroverted, work with other people. But when we come down to it, business is such a wide range of things, right? It's everything from finance to sales to entrepreneurship to marketing. And there's just so many layers to it. And so when I ask a student, what do you mean by business? It's very hard for them to pinpoint what it means. They're just thinking that it offers some stability as a career and it sounds good.
Yeah.
And a lot of people will just say, oh, business, great. And they don't have follow-up questions necessarily for the student. And there's a lot of there's just a lot of business literature out there, like a lot of popular books. My son was reading, oh gosh, what's the one about the sneaker guy? Phil Knight, his book.
Oh, yeah.
And there's
Right.
these videos, right? Or movies, excuse me, that are just popular. And it's these people who've made these businesses and succeeded. And that is a definition of success for a lot of people.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's so funny how kids do not realize, I always say it's an umbrella term, and there are these buckets, and, accounting and sales could not be more different, right? As far as for myself, I'm looking at the DNA of somebody's hardwired personality, and I can tell you from a data driven piece, not even an interest piece, that who looks like they are going to thrive and be happy in accounting looks very different than the person in sales. And I think you got to the heart of something, though, too, is as parents, they just want to know that their kid's going to be able to confidently launch into the next chapter and thrive. When I ask, what do you really want for your kids? I just want them to be happy, and they want them to know that the kid's gone on to the next chapter, which is out of the nest, by the way, and that they get to go on to their next chapter, which is living their best empty nest years. Like that can be fun as well. So I get it, like the stability and the many options that come with business. So when you get this undecided student for business, and hey, listeners, keep listening because we're going to get into like what's trending in business and what makes an impact. If you're
Mhm.
working towards clarity, because you said you love those undecided kids, I love those undecided kids.
Yeah.
How do you talk them through deciding if business is really for them?
Right. A few things. I mean, one is, asking some of the reflection questions of like, what have you enjoyed? What do you enjoy doing outside of the classroom and in the classroom? What are the problems you want to solve in the world? Because I always say business and computer science too are much more of the tools for solving something else.
Yep.
They're not standalone things that you can just study pure computer science, unless you want to become a teacher, which is fine and great,
Yeah.
but you can't just study them on their own. And so I'm trying to ask students some reflective questions about what they've done, but then also really poke into what activities can help them explore. And for me personally, I feel like these words of internship and research have become very big in the high school sector.
It's intimidating too.
Yeah. Well, I'm like, internships and research opportunities were not made for high school students. They don't know enough yet. And I'm like trying to convince a lot of students, get a job, any job, babysit, mow lawns, pet sit, work at like the local fast food place or retail, whatever it is, tutor. Get to know some people and learn some basic skills that you don't learn in the classroom or through an extracurricular activity at school. And these are the things that will actually tell you a lot about business too, especially if you are lucky enough to maybe work at a small business and you get to see like all the different things that maybe this entrepreneur at the small business is really doing. They are doing everything from the sales to the back end pieces of merchandising and inventory to the marketing pieces, right? And like which pieces do you gravitate towards? Can you, if you're working the smaller business in particular, can you help them out with some of those things?
Like
And
that's
I
a
really,
I like that you said, I'm going to interrupt real quick just to say,
yeah.
like, I like that you said small, like a small business, because if you're
Mhm.
listening, people, this gives you, that's great advice. That gives you something to target, right? Instead of like going to work at McDonald's, who externally all of the marketing and things like that are being handled by someone else. They're not handled. You're not going to be able to see them in action. I mean,
Yeah.
a job, a part-time job like that is really an ultimate job shadow. And if it's in a small business, you just named a lot of ways that they've just job shadowed a lot of different roles.
Yeah.
We had a recent guest on the podcast on episode 185, and Ramon talked about how to reframe what we often feel like are little jobs. And I think this goes back to what you were saying. I've found internships can be helpful, but even the word or research, it's so big it can be intimidating, it can feel elusive, and so let's go after just the things that we can gain from what feels little, but sometimes people feel like that's beneath them
Oh,
and
yeah.
not going to set them up for entry into a business program. Because I do want to talk about today like what we both are seeing as making impact extracurricularly, anything they do outside of the classroom that sets them up for entry into business once they know business is for them. Because so we need to move from like business is my undecided catch-all
Right.
to business confidence, and then okay, if I am confident, then how do I go about getting into a business school?
Yes, exactly, exactly. And I think that any job will help a student. And I often tell students actually getting a job is probably the most impressive thing for an admissions officer to see.
Mhm.
You have learned about getting to work on time, working with a manager, doing completely new, unfamiliar tasks, probably working with a set of people you have never, that you don't usually encounter, because usually you just, excuse me, you see your parents, your family, and your peers. But maybe all of a sudden you're working with little kids or older people or, just the general public. And that can be really valuable too. Like what kinds of people do you want to work with? But yes, I think that, and there's nothing wrong with working with a big business either. Obviously, you and I both agree on that. But yes, a small business can really like open up a few other doors. And those are the ones that really need a lot more help too, because you do see these small business owners trying to juggle all the different things. So it can be really fun.
And I just talked about this on the previous episode, so I hate to do it again so quickly, but one student that she was volunteering somewhere
Mhm.
and it was just a food pantry and it wasn't like she was doing a business job, but
Right.
she approached them to volunteer in a business related role, and so she created her own, and I said, do it if you don't even get paid, right?
Yes, yes, the experience is so valuable. And that's what a lot of students, I think, in this day and age, everyone is very focused on academics, taking especially students who are very ambitious and highly motivated. They're looking to get into these great schools and they think they need all these APs and a high GPA and whatnot. But actually, for me personally, the thing that helped me get away from being undecided, and what I see from a lot of students, what helps them get away from being undecided is actually those real world experiences, whether it's in the summer or after school or whatever it is, so that you realize like, hey, you're not a student forever, right? And you
Right.
have a certain set of great academic skills, but how do we foster those other skills that you will need for, whatever it is that you do in life? And having a first job, I think is just such a nice bridge to what's to come.
So I like that you said admissions officers love jobs, because sometimes I get
Yes.
families that are like, I have to have a job, but gosh, is that going to hurt me? No, hear that, right? Or I have to help out at home. Is that going to hurt me? No, you're managing a lot of things. It's teaching a lot of those soft skills, those executive functioning skills that we also get from jobs. So
Yeah.
let's move to like a student has done some of this and they're like, yes, business is going to be for me. And now it's not just an umbrella business. It is, I might be focused on marketing or operations or finance or accounting. What do you see for the students that you're working with as an IEC is moving the needle as far as actually securing a spot in any program or even like the competitive programs?
Sure. I feel like I focus a lot with my students on those reflection pieces. Like, okay, you did a job working. What did you learn from it? What did you take away? What were those lessons? What's some memorable experiences that came out of that? And they may or may not be directly related to what you want to study. So I had a student who's really interested in engineering at first, and then, she did something with a family friend. I think she did some job shadowing. I can't remember exactly. And she said, no, engineering is not for me. What do I do? I think I want to do business now. And I said, well, you just learned all these great skills about collaboration. That's really important for engineering. It's important for
Yep.
business. Like, let's refocus what you're going to say you learned from these jobs. It's less about the technical, maybe, that she was originally going to focus on with the engineering. So really helping students pivot a little bit and rethink and talk about what they've learned. That reflection is so important, to be thoughtful and to say to an admissions officer, like, these are not just the things I did, but this is what the skills that I grew.
So you're really taking those, have the experiences,
Mhm.
reframe the bigger picture, the deeper lessons from them.
Right.
And
Right.
then those are going to be expressed where? In the essays?
And the essays, the activities list. Yeah. And then I also tell students, you can major in anything and go into the business world, right?
Yes.
You and I know this. It's really more about those experiences that you're having. The business field especially wants to know, like, what kinds of work experience have you had? Or, even for clubs, activities, extracurriculars, whatever you want to call them. But what are those experiences that helped you work with other people? What are the experiences that helped you build certain kinds of skills? And for me, when someone says, hey, I want to be a marketing major, I'm like, well, you could do business, you could do marketing, you could do psychology. Guess what?
Communications. Yeah.
Yes, there's so many options. If you want to go into finance, like, maybe you should be a math major. There's a lot of different things. And I would tell you a fun story. I used to work at the University of Chicago. And we had a lot of econ majors because economics is the number one, major, most popular major probably at the University of Chicago. And I remember a group of us academic advisors talking to a group of recruiters about like, what are they looking for? What's important? And I remember this one guy said, all the econ majors look exactly the same. They have
Mm.
had all the same classes. They've had, the same kinds of internship opportunities. And he said something so fascinating. He said, I love the philosophy majors. And we were all like, what? Wait, what? Like philosophy majors and
You're
econ, what?
shaking things up over here.
Yeah, but the philosophy major at the University of Chicago in particular is very logic based. So it's a lot of like that math logic that they need for, some of these careers. And they were great writers. And he said these are skill sets that we really need. I can't remember exactly. I mean, he was a recruiter. I don't remember exactly what he recruited for, but he
Yeah.
said these are skill sets that we really need. These people who can, think clearly through a problem and write about it and express their beliefs. And these are just really strong, interesting students who have some different experiences than the sea of econ majors who all look the same. They really stand out. And I was like, wow, well, I'm going to tell every econ major to be a philosophy major, right? Not really, but like shake it up. If you know that there's a really strong major at the college you're going to go to, or there's a really popular major, right? Like business is, I agree with you, computer science is popular. Computer science is very competitive and
Very.
popular. But I actually think that business is still the number one major in the country. But how are you going to differentiate yourself from all those other business majors, right?
Well,
Whatever.
I think it's too, is having conversations at home where you made a great point and the recruiter helped also make the point. Like, we always begin with the end in mind. So, what is the job that you're wired for that you would love? It's not a soulmate job. There's not only one of them out there in the world, but what are you aiming for? Where are you going to put the GPS pin in that destination
Right.
for that first job that you're going after, your first career move out of after graduation, right?
Mhm.
And then work back to major. You know,
Yeah.
like to your point, some universities don't even have a business major. So a lot of kids will just opt into the econ major for undergrad, but you don't have to have it. Engineering, yeah, you need an engineering degree. We need you to have an engineering degree if you're going to build the building that I'm going to be in. Nursing, my daughter-in-law is a nurse. Teaching, yes, there are some, but business doesn't
Nope.
end that opportunity. Also, the fact that you don't even have to have a college degree to go into business.
Right.
I mean, we're talking about business majors right now, but you
Yeah.
don't have to have a college degree. Now, you might have different opportunities. There are some jobs that, management training programs are going to seek college graduates,
Mhm.
but you can still go into business and do quite well without even having the degree.
Right. But you have to be able to talk about yourself and your experiences
That's right.
in a way that is compelling to show, the recruiter or the hiring manager, whoever it is, that you can do the job, with some basic skills and that
Yeah.
you're ready, willing, and able to learn. And that is going to be the biggest thing in our shifting, changing, crazy world where,
Yeah.
everyone's worried about AI coming and taking these jobs or whatever it is. But if you can say, like, I'm ready to learn, I'm willing to learn, I'm a fast learner, I can adapt, then those are great skills, especially for the business world, which
The
is,
yeah, the kids that I've seen get hired into business roles who don't have a degree, going back to that argument,
oh,
I'm a college junkie, so I would have gotten a college degree no matter what. But if for those that don't go, the ones that I see getting hired in those business jobs, they're making a career move into business, but they've had some jobs where
right.
they maybe did inventory or had to balance the cash register or the books, or they had opening and closing duties, or they made schedules. Those are transferable skills that show that. Now, we're talking a lot about like real world experiences
Mhm.
and extracurricular co-curriculars. I know when students get to college, they feel like extracurriculars is the term for high school students.
Right.
And so we just say anything you're doing in your time outside of your academics, really, is how we're
Right.
doing that. Do you see the extracurriculars, that activities list, and how they're expressed in the essays trumping academics sometimes, not at all? Are there any academic hills that you've seen admissions officers for good business schools are going to die on? How do you navigate that with your students?
So, as you know, the variety in the business programs out there I mean, it's stunning, right?
Yes.
There's lots of places where, you know, They're very, very specific requirements. They really want to see pre-calc or calc. Other places don't really care. I always tell students your transcript is first and foremost, and you do the academic work. Will you be able to succeed at that college?
Yep.
But then at the same time, a lot of maybe future finance majors, students who are thinking about it, maybe they have very similar profiles academically. But is there something, in your experiences that can help show why you're a good fit? So, a great example is the Ross School of Business at the University of
Yeah.
Michigan, right? They have this extensive other piece of their application. It's a direct admit business program. You either get admitted to Ross or not at all to University of Michigan. You can't even list a second choice.
Nope.
It's a high stakes application, right? If you really want to go to Ross School of
Yes.
Business. And it's really interesting because they have a portfolio and an artifact that are required. And the portfolio, students are thinking really hard and they're thinking really big about, maybe big problems. And one of the things that one of my coworkers loves to say is stay local. Like, tell me about something, a local business problem. And my student who got into Ross, was that last year, the year before? I don't know anymore. But she wrote about how Chipotle came in and really, to her local town and took up a whole bunch of business from local businesses. And this was a huge problem, right? They had more advertising money, and a couple of these smaller restaurants had been around forever. They were just real, icons in her village. But then, younger people were gravitating towards like, oh, Chipotle or whatever it was, some of the bigger chains. And so she was writing from real world experience of like watching her town and watching the people in her town be affected by this. And it was a great statement for her portfolio of a business problem. And then she talked about how she wanted to, rectify it.
Right.
So I think that some of these business programs where students have to think beyond the academic piece, think about like, what are the problems around them? How might they solve them? Are really great for, especially Ross has made this a priority for them. They want to know how students are thinking, what are they thinking about? How are they going to make change in the world? And change often happens with our local communities. And so I think there's a lot of variety, I was going to say, in terms of academics, but there's a lot of variety in terms of what admissions officers of business programs are looking for, but the top business schools are looking for something beyond just academics.
Right. We had somebody on the podcast a while ago, and I think we weren't able to say her university, so I'm not going to say it right now. Maybe we were. I'll link to this episode in the show notes, but it was actually about switching majors once you were already in college. And at her university, she said, she doesn't believe that students have to be proficient in calculus to do well in business school for many of the business majors or the concentrations in business. But she said, you cannot switch. If a student comes to me and wants to switch into business and they're struggling through college algebra, pre-calc, she's like, it's not going to happen. Like, you cannot be successful in the program, but they can be successful in business and they just need to major in something else. You brought up a great point. Like, Ross is very, very difficult to get into, as we both know. And as you said, yes, there's a wide variety of rigor as far as entrance. We did a study in early 2024 of the 50 state flagships, and we looked at one of the questions we asked, and I know you've seen my data set before on this, and we've talked about it in the Facebook group that we're both in, but we asked, is there any major that is restricted or nearly impossible to switch into after you're already on campus? And business was regularly on that list for all research universities, not even top universities. So for the 50 state flagships, business is just very difficult. So you've got to ask those questions really in advance, right?
Yeah, I love your spreadsheet. That's been such a helpful resource.
And we could, let me give everybody, it's at flourishcoachingco.com/majors. So you go there, we'll give you the spreadsheet, we'll give you the email that we sent to every college asking them for this information. So if we didn't do it for the college you're interested in, you can take that email and know that you're asking the right questions to get the right answer. And then I give just a 6-minute teaching video on how it works. But go ahead. What were you going to say?
Yeah, there's just a wide variety, but you're right. Because business is so popular, And because not everyone knows what they're getting into when they're looking for a business major, I think that colleges really have to think about their enrollments, right? Like they don't want to have everyone apply the business major and then they can't graduate and get the classes they need in the 4 years. And so that's a huge problem on the other side of the desk. And it's something that students need to be cognizant of. And I always tell students, if you're going to apply to college and you've got a few things in mind, pick the hardest one because you can always switch out of it, but you can't switch into it.
Yeah, I mean, the once you're on campus, then there are opportunities that have slipped away. So it's better to start hard and then ease in. That could go for like nursing. We see that a lot
Mhm.
as well,
Yep.
right? I'll see people like, I might be a te want to be a teacher, but I might want to be a nurse. Maybe both fit because they really want to help people. It's
Mhm.
going to be harder in most cases to get into a nursing program than to
Right.
get into an education program. So if you're truly still undecided when you're applying to school, hopefully not, join us and launch Career Clarity and we'll get that figured out. Then go for nursing. So as we're wrapping up, here's a question for you.
Sure.
What mistakes do you see? I mean, we've kind of said mistakes, like just thinking business is undecided and they don't have to have a focus. That would be a mistake, right? Thinking only a business degree will lead to a career in business. But are there any other missteps or mistakes that you see students making when it's like figuring out the colleges for business, applying to business schools? Any final words of advice?
Just going back to those class choices, I know there's a lot of talk about whether or not calculus is necessary. I generally tell students if you can do calculus, try to do it. It's again to have it and not need it than to feel like, oh, I should have taken calculus. And I hear a lot of students who are like, well, I'm not going to go into any kind of STEM or business major. I'm going to take AP stats, after pre-calc or whatever it is. And I'm like, well, you did well in the math classes. Just take the harder one, just for a little bit and just, and then decide from there. So I think there's a lot with class choices. And in particular, I will also say that there are a lot of business electives at some of the high schools. They vary a lot. I always tell students, go talk to your school counselor to find out what the real deal is, or talk to someone who's taken that business elective to see if it's really going to help you decide or not. Because those business electives are kind of all over the map. And I've heard a lot of different things. So I love to talk about class choices, and that's definitely something that you want to think about as your
Right.
high school.
Well, that's a benefit of having somebody like you on their side as an IEC is being able to collaborate on curricular choices and extracurricular activities. So we will put a link in the show notes that if you're listening to Anita and you're like, okay, I need a guide and we need some extra support, you reach out to her. She would love to help. So, Anita, thank you for making time again.
Yeah, it was so great to see you again, Lisa. And I'm always happy to chat with you. So this has been great.
Thank you.